remember the 3-month lockdown that we had at the start of the year when we all had to stay home and nobody went to work and nobody went to school and everything was closed off. And unfortunately, it didn't really work because although it managed to slow the virus a bit, it bounced back and a second wave was on its way. And now we're being told that we can fix this second wave, with just a nifty little couple of weeks of very kind of mild restrictions, keeping most things open. And like everybody else, I don't believe a word of it. So the UK is now in what's called a 3-tier system, which is a system made up by Boris Johnson and his cronies. The most interesting thing about it is that the 3 tiers are not all that different from each other, right? In all of them, the schools are open. In all of them, people are going to work. In all of them, shops are open. Loads and loads of stuff stays open right the way through the 3 tiers. In all of them, in fact, pubs are open with some slightly additional restrictions in the top tier. The pubs are open, but in all of them, there's a 10 p.m. curfew. Now, this 10 p.m. curfew, let's talk about the impact that has. New Scientist tells me that scientists are unable to measure the impact of a 10 p.m. pub and restaurant curfew because it is too small to be statistically significant on the kind of data that they're looking at. So it's not like we're not listening to the science. We're not even listening to the scientists when they say that measure is so trivial that it's not even worth thinking about or discussing or contemplating. So why have we got a 10 p.m. curfew, even at the supposedly most relaxed tier? Well, I mean, there are all sorts of theories, aren't there? But I can't help thinking, why is it that the pubs in the UK all used to close at 11 o'clock until relatively recently? And the answer is that during World War I, we brought in closing the pubs at 11 p.m. so that people wouldn't be so drunk and hungover and they'd be able to get more work done in the munitions factories. And I can't help thinking that it is blindingly obvious that that's what the government is doing. They're saying, right, everybody go out less, everybody drink less, and then you can work harder the next day, slogging your guts out, making money for companies that we own shares in. It doesn't make a scratch of sense. The difference, London has now moved from the most relaxed tier to the middle tier, tier 2, and very, very little has changed. The only thing that's changed is that you are now not allowed to go round and visit your friends' houses. You're not allowed to go and visit people indoors. You can still meet up with them outdoors, but you can't go and visit people indoors, which essentially means that you're no longer allowed to have sex with your partner if you don't live with them. And the weird thing is that whether or not you agree with it, closing the pubs has an impact because the pubs are closed and people can't go to the pub. Closing the schools has an impact because the schools are closed and you can't go to the schools. And incidentally, of the students that I teach about 10 students on my maths tutoring rounds. About half of them are currently not at school because they've had COVID cases at school and they've had to close the schools down. So, it is having an impact, even if young people are to some extent resilient to it. It is having a huge impact having them at schools. But if you close the schools, people don't go to school. If you tell people not to go and have sex with their partner, does anyone really believe that works? I mean, the US has been aggressively teaching abstinence-only sex education for decades and decades and decades. And what has it led to? Like soaring rates of STDs and teenage pregnancy. The fact is, the harder you tell people not to have sex, the more they want to go and do it anyway. It just will not work. I mean, if you just wind back to the sort of Victorian era and they were like, sex was terrible and wrong, don't do it until you're married. And even now, the very same politicians who are telling us that we shouldn't be having sex. I mean, we've just literally found out about Boris Johnson having yet another affair, haven't we? The Jennifer Arcuri story is now confirmed. He was having an affair with Jennifer Arcuri. So literally, while they're telling us to not have sex, we know that they're all ruddy well up to it. And what this has created in our society is this division, this conflict between people who are going, no, coronavirus is real and serious and we must take action to prevent it spreading and killing people. And people who are going, this government is scamming us and just abusing its power to try and control us for their own profits and means with a set of rules that they don't even believe apply to them. And those two groups of people are in conflict with one another. And here's the weird thing. They're both right. The government is conning us and feeding us absolute rubbish. This 3-tier system isn't going to solve anything. This 2-week lockdown isn't going to solve anything. But still, it is real and we should be careful and we do need to take measures. And what we ought to do is have a proper, effective lockdown with an effective track and trace, with effective testing, with actual stuff going on. But that won't work while this government is still in power, because nobody trusts them, nobody believes them, nobody will do the things that they suggest, because we know they're not suggesting them in good faith. We know it's coming out of a place of nothing more than greed and self-centred arrogance and an attempt at tokenism from time to time. The fact is that the only way we can get out of this pandemic is to get rid of the government and elect somebody that we might stand a long shot at trusting and believing, and then we could actually work together to do something that works. But until we get rid of Boris Johnson, we're in a state of permanently screwed, and honestly, I'm quite depressed about it.